Storytime about my horrible toxic ex. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime, it was sent to me on Instagram. My ex and I had been friends for 3 months, and he asked me out. I said yes because I really liked him. But the relationship only lasted 1 month. He started showing red flags really quick. He would constantly try to monopolize my time. If I told him that I couldn't hang out, he would show up to my house randomly without even asking if he could come over. It's like he was checking to see if I was telling the truth or not. Anytime I would be babysitting, he would also show up and ask to hang out. Obviously, I would say no because I was working. He also monitored all of my social media. If I posted anything about BLM, he would get so angry and he wouldn't talk to me. One day I get a text from him saying, "I don't think this is gonna work out anymore." He actually broke up with me over text. I was on a road trip with my family at the time, so I was so distracted and I thought I'd be okay. A few days later, I find out he started dating my best friend. Then he started sending me abusive text messages. I'm at the mall waiting for this girl to show up, but she never does. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Like I said before, this girl told me she couldn't send me any pictures, so I didn't even know what she looked like. That's when I started suspecting something. We got along so well in our Snapchat conversations, it was almost too good to be true. So of course, I decide to call her. And guess who answers? Natalie, with her new friends who she knows that I hate. At that moment, I realized that she dumped me and then got with these new girls that she knew I hated. Of course, I was furious. I wanted to say something, but before I could, Natalie hung up the phone. And of course she did. She knew I was going to go off on her. Well, I start calling Natalie's phone several times, and she doesn't answer. Then I see that she unadded me off Snapchat and blocked me. So now I have no way of getting in contact with her. I spent weeks talking to this girl only to find out it was my ex-best friend catfishing me. So of course, I drive all the way to Natalie's house and her mom answers. Part 3 is
Part 2 about the girl who was obsessed with me. So like I said, she basically told me that those were her nudes, even though I took the pictures and I knew they were mine. But I was like, okay, whatever, I'm not gonna argue with her. Well, then I get a text from my boyfriend, and he goes, "What the fuck, you're so weird, why would you send me somebody else's nudes?" And I'm just sitting there like, what the fuck? And I tried to explain to him that I had no fucking clue why this girl was saying they were hers. But then he said that I was weird as fuck and he broke up with me. So like a week later, I see them walking around school together. And my friends tell me that they're now dating. And I really wasn't that mad about it. I was like, okay, maybe that's the only way that she could think of to get a boyfriend. Well, I forgot that my Instagram was logged in on his phone because he had super bad trust issues and wanted to make sure I wasn't cheating on him. So I text him and I'm like, hey, can you take my Instagram off your phone? And I saw that he read my text message, but I got no response. Well, a week later, you guys are never gonna guess what fucking happened. Storytime about how I found out that my boyfriend was trying to get with another girl on Valentine's Day. Okay, there's a lot that goes into this story time, so let me break it down for you real quick. I was a sophomore and my boyfriend and I had been dating for about 4 months now. And he was a junior. Well, there was this girl that he was for some reason obsessed with in his Spanish class. She was a freshman, and I know you're probably thinking, oh, well, how did you know he was obsessed with her? Well, he would Snapchat this girl 24/7. Even his friends told me he was obsessed with her. So I talked to him and I told him I was uncomfortable with how much he was talking to this girl. And he said, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'll block her. Now, I didn't ask him to do that, but it made me feel more confident in how he felt about me. Well, Valentine's Day comes around. And we didn't talk all day until he came to pick me up. I wished him a happy Valentine's Day and got left undelivered. So we get to the restaurants and we decide to put our phones at the end of the table so that way we would be more focused on each other. Well, he goes to the bathroom and then I see this name pop up on his phone. Like for part 2.
Extremely toxic best friend story time. So when I was in 8th grade, there was this boy. And this boy would go around telling almost every girl that he liked her. And I was one of those girls. And he would do stuff with all of us. And there were like 11 of us. So we all hated each other. Especially this one girl, and we're gonna call her Abby. And every time we saw each other, we would be super mean to each other. Well, a year passed, we stopped talking to this kid. And I bumped into her at homecoming and basically apologized. So after that, we became best friends. And everything was good until every time I told her about a guy, she would start talking to them. Like this one boy that I was Snapchatting and talking to, she accidentally sent nudes to him and said, oh, sorry, I meant to send them to my boyfriend. So then she called one of my other best friends and said, no, it actually wasn't an accident. And of course he told me because he was my best friend. So I was like, whatever, and stopped talking to the boy. And she did it again, like for part 2.
Part 2 to me almost getting murdered on my school trip. So when Penny took out one of the knives, she literally threw it right at me. Somehow it only managed to land 5 inches from me and I was okay. So I took off running out of the hotel room. I immediately went to our director And literally because her parents fund most of the band stuff, he straight up couldn't care less. I told my mom, who happened to work with the superintendent's wife, so she told her the whole story and gave my mom his phone number. Let's just say they were suspended and the teacher was fired. She swore up and down that her and Tyler were going to get back together, but it's been 3 years later and she's still crazy and he still hates her, and I'm still with him. So I guess the moral of the story is please take it seriously if someone threatens you, especially if it's a crazy ex. Love you guys. Follow my Insta and DM me if you have your own story that you want to share.
I told my husband I was going to be at the spa all day long. I wanted to see if he was going to bring the neighbor around to cheat on me some more. When I got in the car to leave, I get a message that he sent to the neighbor. Like I said, I had planted an app in his phone, so I was receiving all the messages he was sending and receiving. And of course, he sends her a message saying, hey, my wife's going to be at the spa all day. We're free. And she replies saying, perfect, I'll come over. My stomach dropped. I drove around for a bit and waited for her to get to my house. Then I see she sends him a message saying she's there. That was my cue to go back to my house to catch him in the act. I race back and enter the house super quietly. I go into the living room and don't see anything, so I assumed they were in our bedroom. I go up to the bedroom and no one's there. And I see they're in the backyard in the pool. I pull out my phone and press record. I run downstairs and I surprise them in the act. They were both naked and my husband jumps out of the pool and wraps himself in a towel. Our neighbor stays in the pool. My husband says, I was gonna tell you, I swear. It gets worse. Part 3 is up.
Storytime Tinder edition. Okay, the story blew up on Twitter like a while ago, but I'm just gonna retell it because it's very informational. So there was this guy and this girl, and they met through Tinder, and then they met up and they went on this date. And they were out at dinner, and then she starts not feeling so well. And then she says, I really need to go home. And he says, yeah, I'll drive you home. And she says, okay. So then they get to her house, and then she starts feeling better. So then she says, do you want to come in for some coffee? And then he says, yeah, sure. So they go inside, they have their coffee, and then she doesn't feel well again. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel well again. I think you really need to leave. And he's like, okay. And he leaves. And then she goes to bed, and in the middle of the night, she wakes up, and she hears this noise down in her kitchen. And so she locks her door, and she calls the cop. And the 911 operator is just on the other line saying, can you just stay on the line until the cops get there? And then the cops get there, and they're like, the door is locked. Like, we don't think anyone's inside. And she's like, I promise you, someone's inside my house. I can hear them. She says, you have my permission to break down the door. So she's still up in her room, and then she hears the cops break down the door. And then she hears some wrestling and some fighting. Part 2.
I see my best friend kissing my dad on the neck, and when they both saw me, they jumped off the couch right away. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My best friend said, oh, you're finally home. And my dad literally just walked toward the kitchen like nothing had happened. My best friend walks toward me to give me a hug, but I stop her straight in her tracks. I asked her why she was kissing my dad's neck. She laughs and said, of course I wasn't. And then I said, I just saw it. And she said that she was just thanking him for all the stuff my mom and dad do for her. Right, I was not buying it. My dad didn't even look me in the eyes after that. I decided not to question her any further, but I was really angry with my best friend. After that, I was totally convinced that there was something going on between them. So I decided to set a trap. I told my mom and dad I would be at work all day and that I would be home really late. And I told my best friend the same thing and that I wouldn't be able to hang out with her. I knew that my mom would be at work all day, which meant that my dad had the house all to himself. I said bye to my dad, but I sneaked back into the house and hid in my room all day. Then I started hearing voices. It sounded just like my best friend. I opened my dad's bedroom door and there they are on the bed doing the dirty. Disgusting.
What's one really bad thing you did as a child that you kept secret for your entire life and didn't tell nobody? I'll go first. I got a lot of stories like this, but this is just one of them. So my mama used to put me in daycare, and in my daycare, we used to do field trips, and we went to the YMCA. So while we were in the pool, this one white kid comes up to me. He asked me, like, why are you black? And I was kind of embarrassed, but I wasn't mad at the kid. I was more embarrassed than I was mad. And I told him that my parents painted me every single day. And I was thinking back at the time when I scraped my knee and the skin came off and there was like no blood. It was just bone. But I didn't know that it was bone. I thought that I was just white underneath. So I was like, it's true, like I can peel my skin off and prove it. When I did that, I peeled skin off my finger and it was a lot of skin and I started bleeding really bad. So the water started getting red and the daycare people tried to get everybody out the water like there was something going on. And then once everybody was out of the water, one of the daycare people go, I'm so sorry, everybody. I lost my tampon. I need to find it. Okay, so what happened was pretty self-explanatory, but I can make a part 2 if you guys want.
Storytime about the toxic boy that I almost started dating. So a little background information. Him and I both met on a set of a movie that we were in. Well, a few days into filming, he asked me out. So of course I said yes. And it was literally the most amazing first date ever. So he asked for a second date and I said yes, of course. And the second date was terrible. He literally just tried to get in my pants the whole time. So then he asked me for a third date. And for some reason I said yes, hoping that it was not anything like the second date. And he didn't show up. So I pretty much got stood up. And then he even blocked my number. So a few months go by and I end up moving in with my best friend.
about an hour away from where I was living when I met him. Well, the one night she came home and told me that he had messaged her on Instagram, which I thought was funny as hell because my best friend did not swing that way. So she pretends to flirt with him and asks him to come over. So he drives an hour to our apartment, and when he walks in, he just sees me standing in the kitchen. He immediately walked out.
Story time about how my boss caught me hooking up with my coworker at work. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. A few years back, I was working at a really bougie restaurant on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. I was a host and all of the servers were super attractive. Everyone was either a model or an actress. I'd only been working there for a few months when this new guy got hired. Let's call him John. John was super attractive. Every single girl that worked at the restaurant was trying to find out if he was single or not. Well, it turns out he had a girlfriend. His girlfriend was super jealous. She was so jealous that she would actually come to the restaurant and sit in his section and just order food. She would stay for hours. One day, John and I had the opening shift. It was him, myself, and all of the kitchen staff. It was pretty slow, so we got to talking. He told me he was a model and he said that I was so beautiful that I should start modeling too. Well, that went straight up to my head. Once our shift ended, he asked me if I wanted to hang out, and of course I said yes. Then he grabbed my hand and took me to the back room. Suddenly, he closed the door and started kissing me. I was a little bit shocked, but I got into it. My manager walks in. Part 2 is...
One time, I was behind the register at Victoria's Secret. This customer walks in and immediately everybody spots her as a red flag. She's just picking up items, throwing them in her bag, not looking at sizes, not looking at colors. So everybody's like, Everyone's on their walkie like, watch this customer. She's coming to the fitting room. She's headed to the cash wrap. Somebody get her. Check her ID. Get her. Get her. She has a bag full of stuff. And guess who gets her at the register? Me. So she comes to my register and she dumps out her stuff and we're having a regular conversation. Hi, how are you? Yada, yada, yada. Her total comes up to probably between $700 to $900. It was expensive. My manager is at the register next to me talking to me on the walkie. Ashley, make sure you get that ID. Don't matter what she's using, make sure you get that ID. So I ask her for the ID because she's paying credit. Why do you need to ask for my ID? Just take it, run it. I'm like, no ma'am, I'm sorry, I need your ID for the purchase. She starts to raise her voice.
Part 2 about how my boyfriend found out that his best friend got me pregnant. So like I said, my boyfriend was black, his best friend was white, and because I doubted that it was his best friend's kid, I decided to wait it out. Say it with me, bad idea. So fast forward, I'm in the delivery room and I decide not to have my boyfriend in there. Well, let's just say good thing that he did. Bitch, whenever this thing popped out, it was white as fucking paper. So I was like to the doctor, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna have a panic attack. Please get the baby out of the room. I don't want anybody around the baby right now. So when my boyfriend came back in the room, I was like, oh, we can't see the baby. He's having some issues. He's over here freaking out. I'm having a fucking panic attack about what I'm gonna do. And they brought my kid back and I was like, that's not my kid. And this girl looked so confused. She was like, oh, okay. And my boyfriend and I are laughing. We're like, oh, haha, that's funny. Then she comes back into the room and she's like, ma'am, this is your kid. So my boyfriend started screaming and he broke up with me after that. Like, how rude to just leave me with a kid by myself. No, I'm just joking. I know that was pretty fucked.
My boyfriend's crazy ex slaps me and lunges at me. Of course, I start attacking her right back. My boyfriend separates us finally and asks both of us to leave his apartment. I was so crushed that he didn't believe me. So far, she had spied on us in bed, hacked my Instagram to send DMs to herself to make it look like I was talking to another guy, and threatened me by telling me that she knew where I lived. Oh yeah, and she physically attacked me too. I left my boyfriend's apartment and a few days later he comes looking for me. I explained everything to him and he said he had no choice but to believe me. His ex was too crazy. Then he told me that she went back to his apartment that night and picked his lock. She got naked and crawled into his bed. He woke up, kicked her out, and went straight to get a restraining order. He scanned his apartment for more cameras and found 2 more. What should we do?
I've always had a good relationship with my mother-in-law up until I was pregnant. My husband's side of the family hasn't had a girl born in the past 100 years. So when everyone found out I was pregnant with a girl, no one believed me. Everyone was so shocked when it was announced that most of them denied it up until the moment she was born. And that's when the horrible comments started. Whenever my husband wasn't around, my mother-in-law would make snarky comments like, I wonder where she got that nose. It's definitely not my son's. I never told him and let everything slide because she's older and she's my mother-in-law. But when I was pregnant with baby number 2, and yes, it was another girl, I told him to wait as long as possible because I know she wouldn't like the news. When she found out it was a girl, she started sobbing and screaming. She was calling me a whore and demanded that I get out of her house. Those girls are not ours. She's a whore, a slut. My son did not make those girls. She looked at me and said, I let you get away with it the first time. I took you in as family. I allowed my son to believe he fathered that brat, but I will not allow it again. My husband was yelling at his mom, and I got up and took my daughter and I ran to the car sobbing.
Story time to when I found out my boyfriend just got out of prison and what he was locked up for. And he's my ex, by the way, now. So I was working at a fast food place, and I guess he was hired. I went to the back of the break room and we started talking, having a normal conversation. He was flirting. I didn't realize he was flirting, but he was flirting. And then eventually we became friends, and from friends we just started talking every day, and on top of that we worked together. And honestly, I regret everything. Like, I regret it, but at the end of the day, it happened. So one day we hung out. He told me if I wanted to follow him somewhere, and I was confused because I wasn't sure where he was taking me. But when we showed up to the place in the middle of like West Bubblefuck, I was confused, and he's like, stay here. He told me to stay outside, and he's like, you can look me up. He gave me his full name, his full government name and everything, like for part 2.
So this one time I had to stay at my grandma's because my dad was on vacation. And I was having a huge box of clothes come in, and I was not about to have these hoes stolen, so I had my friend stop by to put them inside. So I called my friend up and I was like, hey, can you tell me when you get to my house and let me know when you put the package in? She's like, I got you, shawty. I was like, bet, girl. So around 10 minutes later, I got a call from her freaking out. She was like, Kayla, is there anybody at your house? I was like, no, my dad's on vacation and I'm at my grandma's. She said, no, Kayla, there is somebody at your house right now. So I start freaking out. I'm like, girl, what do you mean? And she said she saw someone walk across this huge window and then my dad's lights turned on. So I start freaking out. I'm like, what did you see walk across the window? Like, who did it look like? And she said it was just a black, tall figure that walked across that window. And around 5 minutes of being on the phone, freaking out, she said my dad's lights turned off again. Eventually, me and my grandma drove by the house to make sure nobody was there. And of course, nobody was in my house. And it only gets worse.